All right, so this is the story of the Chicago trip. This is another story about my Vampire the Masquerade tabletop game. And it's kind of a follow up to the last one, but they're not really related that much, so you don't need to have seen one to understand the other. They're kind of separate, they're isolated incidences. These are different X Files. In the other video, I talked about the idea of storytelling in like a non-linear fashion by using that system of like, you know, the world, you come up with a problem, and then you react to the player's attempts to solve that problem. And this is a really good example of that because this entire story is just that. It's just me coming up with a problem and then reacting to the players. So the problem is Al Capone. In the 30s, Al Capone was convicted of tax fraud and he was shipped off to prison where he eventually died. In the Vampire the Masquerade universe, that's not actually what happens. In their mythology, Loden, the Prince of Chicago, kidnaps Al Capone and converts Al Capone into a vampire. The game that I'm running currently takes place in the 1930s. So, why not include it? Because Loden, he's kind of a big deal. He's a well-known NPC. My players don't know who he is, but he's a well-known NPC in the vampire mythos. And it's kind of like if you're running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, you might be tempted to throw in like Mordenkainen or Tasselhoff Burrfoot, Jim Dark Magic, that emo elf guy, because those are celebrity characters in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, and so throwing them in to let your players meet them is kind of fun. And I did it in my Star Wars campaign. They spent all kinds of time hanging out with Luke Skywalker. So I know that the Prince of LA in my game is Divya. And Divya originally was the prince, or not originally, but previously was the Prince of Verdun. Verdun got pretty badly messed up during the First World War, so after the end of that war, she left Verdun and came to America. And I had already mentioned this in talking with some of the players through other NPCs, that on her way through America from like the East Coast to LA, she had stopped off in Chicago. She had met with Loden. Loden had assisted her in getting over there. And since Loden's a prince and Divya is closer to Alcatraz than you are, she owes you a favor, so send her to do it. This all started a few sessions back when the players were at Elysium, just kind of hanging out, talking with NPCs, and Jeanette, the harpy, comes up to Cassandra and says to her, "Oh, the prince wishes to speak with you." And Cassandra's like, "Ooh, the prince wants to talk to me. Ooh, this is so exciting." And she's like, goes over there and she's bowing and curtsying and your majestying, and she's very, very excited to talk to the prince. And the prince just hands her a letter. And the letter says, "Dear Divya, I offer you greetings and best wishes from Chicago. With this letter comes my desire that your domain remains strong and secure as my own, though I do not imagine you require any such wishing on my part to make that hope a reality. Enjoyable as it is to place ink to paper for the sole purpose of correspondence, I write to you in need of your assistance. I do so with the confidence it will be rendered with the efficacy and immediacy equal to that which with mine was offered during your recent journey across the New World. A retainer of mine has been taken from me and is soon to be transported outside the borders of my domain. Fortuitously, his destination is near to your realm, and recovery of him by your agents, so far from the epicenter of his public celebrity, should be a much more trivial matter. It is my hope that you find it within your power to recover him at some point in this journey, to replace him with a substitute adequate to satisfy the curiosity of the kind, and to deliver the genuine man back here to me. Until that time, I shall remain sincerely yours, Loden, Prince of Chicago." The prince just gives her the letter, and that's it. She just says,
Make it so.
And so Cassandra is like, "Oh, this is important." She's heard of Loden. She's actually had a vision of Loden. She had a Malkavian vision a while back about Loden being attacked by werewolves, which is something that does happen in the official lore of World of Darkness. So I just threw that in there as one of my Malkavian insights that I hand out when they roll their Malkavian insight and they get some vision. I'm like, here's a random fact, and they're like, "Oh my god, a clown that serves hamburgers will one day rule the world? What does this mean?" Odin will survive his attack by the Moon Children. What are the Moon Children? They get these weird messages, and it's like whispers from the abyss. I'm like, what the fuck does this mean? The password is marsupial. The password to what? This was as far as I had thought into this. I was like, Capone's going to Alcatraz, Loden wants him, you guys do it. I just trusted that they would figure something out. If I had been forced to guess, I probably would have thought mind control, because vampires are pretty good at mind control. They got a lot of mind control abilities. But that's not what Cassandra did. Cassandra immediately jumped to a different conclusion, and she ran right off to the Chantry to go talk to the Tremere. The Tremere are the vampire wizards, basically. They're kind of like evil Hogwarts mixed with the Church of Scientology and like Satan worshippers. They are formerly mages who chose to become vampires to become immortal, but then because they're vampires, they no longer have human souls. They can't do magic. So instead, they had to resort to blood magic, or they call it thaumaturgy, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's human sacrifice magic. It's magic with lots and lots of blood and guts involved. And it's pretty gross. And I'd say that in general, the Tremere are probably one of the most purely, almost inherently evil factions in the world of darkness. In the vast realm of bad guys, they are among the worst because all of their power is derived from basically murdering people en masse to boil their blood into magic spells. And the players know the Tremere a little bit because one of them is a Tremere. Archibald is a Tremere. And so they go to speak to Archibald's sire, Dominetta. They go there and they talk to Dominetta, and Cassandra's like, "Hey, Dominetta, I was wondering, do you know any magics in your magics that might be able to create some kind of doppelganger of somebody?" Dominetta thought about it for a second, because I had to think about it for a second. Because the first thing I thought of was, I don't think there is any way they can do that. But then, reacting to what the players bring you, thaumaturgy is magic. It does a lot of different things. Most of the vampire disciplines are pretty narrow in what they can accomplish, but thaumaturgy is like all kinds of stuff. So I was like, why not? Why couldn't that work? As long as it stuck to the two tenets of blood magic, which are that A, it requires a lot of blood, and B, like there should be a sense of like you're always kind of trading your soul to do this kind of magic. Yes, I can do that, and I will do that for the prince. I won't charge you, but you'll have to provide all of the materials. Sandra's like, sure, absolutely. What materials do you need? Let me get up my notebook. And so Dominetta says, I will need a mirror, an iguana. I will need a dictionary, an atlas, and an encyclopedia. I will need images of Al Capone. I will need as much information as you can get me about Al Capone, especially anything written in his own words. If you could get a recording of his voice, that would be great. If you could get news footage of him, that would be great. Then I'll need two other things. A lot of blood. I can't remember how much. I think it was something like 500 liters or something ridiculous. And I'll need a baby. And I expected that at this point, Cassandra would just be like, no. Because when the group put together their characters, they pick tenets. And those are like the rules for the party. And one of them is we don't harm children, which Cassandra's player was really adamant about putting on there. Like she really wanted that on there. Then she herself has one of her convictions on her character, like for her personal conviction, is that I do not harm women or children. So when I said this, I was like, that she'll definitely just say no, because that's so counter to her character. But she said, okay, no problem. I got it. I'll bring you these things in like a week. So she goes out and she buys all the shit that she needs, the regular shit. She gets an iguana. And then she goes to the hospital. And she does not look for Dr. Carter. She looks for Dr. Carter's ghoul, Dr. Weaver, who the players know because they were part of a whole storyline that got Dr. Weaver turned into a ghoul. She goes to Dr. Weaver and she's like, hey, I got a question. Do you have like a blood bank or something where you have lots and lots of blood? And Dr. Weaver's like, no. I looked this up and I was like, blood banks don't really exist yet. Like, blood transfusion is still kind of in its infancy. They haven't figured out how to freeze plasma yet. So, like, they don't really have that yet. It's not really a thing. And Cassandra's like, okay, well, could we possibly buy all of that blood that you throw away from all those dead bodies? So Dr. Weaver's like, okay, I had Cassandra roll to persuade her, and she rolls well. She's a very charismatic character. And Dr. Weaver's like, okay, yeah, I guess. We could set up a thing. And so I pull up the interwebs, and I do some quick and dirty math. And I look up, like, what the death rate per year in Los Angeles was in that decade. And then I like, divide that by the number of hospitals, and then, like, divide that by the number of days in a year, and try and, like, get a rough estimate of how many dead bodies probably on average go through this place on a daily basis. And I come up with a number, and I do some quick calculations, and then I'm like, okay, so, like, it'll take, like, in 10 days, she thinks she probably would have been able to accumulate enough blood that she can fulfill this amount, whatever it was, 500 liters or whatever, that you need. And it'll cost this much money. And Cassandra's like, fantastic. I'll pay it. No problem. And then she and Archie go off to another hospital, different hospital, to look at the what do you call it? Maternity ward. Going forward, Cassandra's player actually kept saying that she had really made a mistake and forgotten that she had this compunction against killing children.
I've made a huge mistake.
Like, she kept bringing it up and kept being like, I'm so uncomfortable with this, that we're killing children. And everyone at the hill will be like, it was your fucking idea. None of us wanted to murder a child. You went to this immediately, and then you were cool with it. And she's like, I know, it was a bad role-playing moment. I don't want to do it. And they're like, well, it was their idea. So they set this all up. They get everything going. She sends her ghoul out to, like, reserve plane tickets and, like, charter a private plane to fly them to different airports to get to Chicago. They use contact rolls to find out where the U.S. Marshals are going to be so they can get a plan of Capone's schedule so they can find a town to attack him, because they want to grab him before he gets to San Francisco, like, well before, because not only if he gets to San Francisco there's more people, if he gets to Alcatraz it's more complicated, but also San Francisco in my game is run by the Sabbat, and they don't want to go over there. They were there once before. They went to San Francisco exactly one time, and they saw Matau, the Sabbat voivode, like, grab the prince's spine, fuse it through his body, and like, flesh craft it into the fucking concrete. And they're like, we're not going back to San Francisco, no thank you. Then there's a little kerfuffle when Haven burns down, and all of her equipment is lost. She has to go buy new stuff, like she needs a new dictionary, has to get another chameleon, because the first one died in the fire. But, yeah, they're all set, and then they get all the blood, and then they go to the chantry, and then all they gotta do is get the baby. And this was, to me, this is one of my favorite things that has happened in the game so far. They sneak into the hospital in the middle of the night. They go into the maternity ward, and they find the room full of babies. And Cassandra goes in there, and she says, I've really been expecting her for so long to be like, to back out of this, to be like, never mind, I can't do it. And even at the last moment when she got in there, I was really hoping, like, she was going to get in there, pick up the baby, and just be like, I just can't do it. Like, it's against my character. And I was like, that would be such a great story. You'll piss off the prince. Like, Loden will be mad. Everyone will be pissed at you but it'll be because of, like, this moral decision that you made. And I was like, that's really going to be cool. But instead, she does what people often do in games and in real life, when they're put in a position where they have to choose between, sticking to their moral held beliefs and, a minor inconvenience. And more often than not, what they decide to do is, let's just get rid of those moral beliefs. I don't really want to be inconvenienced. And so you rationalize. And that's what she does. And she comes up with this idea. She uses this term that I'd never heard before. It was something like forgotten child or like lost baby or something like that. They're like, I want to find a lost baby. I can't remember what she said, what she called it. I was like, what do you mean? What does that mean? And she like describes it, and basically what she's describing is a dumpster baby. She wants a dumpster baby. She wants a baby whose mother doesn't want it. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not a scientist, but I'm pretty sure that if you were to walk into a maternity ward, they wouldn't have like dumpster baby written on the chart of any of these kids. Like if you pick it up, it's not going to be like, okay, blood pressure, name, does it have sickle cell anemia, does the mother want to throw in a dumpster? I don't think that's on the medical chart. So I'm not sure how you're going to determine that. And just like, no, I'm going to look into the cob. I'm going to look into the Malkavian hive mind to try and sense, you know, which of these babies is unwanted by its parents. And I want to flip a plot card for this. I've been saving them. I'm like, okay. So she flips a plot card. She finds a baby, and I tell her, you believe that this baby is not wanted by its mother. She's like, perfect. And she takes it, and they get out of there. Now, it raises an interesting question. Can a Malkavian look into the hive mind, which is the shared subconsciousness of all Malkavians, and find something so specific as a baby in one room that just happens to not be wanted by its mother? The answer, of course, is no. That's not how the hive mind works. That'd be virtually impossible. And then it raises a second question, which is, if you sacrifice a baby in a blood ritual whose mother didn't want it, does that somehow make it less horrible, what you've done? And of course the answer is no. No, what you've done is just as horrible. But going all the way back to the very beginning of the game, of Vampire the Masquerade as a game, what is this game about? What has it always been about? This is a game of personal horror. So, can Cassandra look into the hive mind and actually find a baby that is unwanted? Probably not. If she does that make it less horrific that she sacrificed this baby? No, it doesn't. But that doesn't matter, because she believes that. Her character thinks that makes it better. Her character has convinced herself that makes it better. She has rationalized her own evil, which is the very core of what it is to lose humanity, which is what the game is all about. Are you going to remain human, or are you going to become a monster?
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
And this is a moment where this character very clearly became a monster. So I was like, perfect. They do the ritual. They get the fake Al Capone. Looks just like Al Capone, sounds pretty much like Al Capone, acts like Al Capone. They take him, they get on their plane, and they take off. As they're getting going, they say, like, where are we going to stay when we get there? And they start realizing, oh, you know, this is probably really dangerous for us. We should bring a ghoul, because we're going to be going through unknown territory. We're going to be like sleeping in strange places. We need someone to watch over us while we're asleep. It's not safe for us to just like crawl into an airplane hangar or into a dumpster, right? That's what you bring a ghoul for. But the problem is, two of the players, Nathan and Archibald, they don't have ghouls. Cassandra has a ghoul, Sergio. But she's like, he can't come. He has a job. Like, he's a fashion designer. He has to stay here and design things. I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird. The whole point of having a ghoul is to be your servant. But she's like, no, he's his own person. He has a career. I can't interfere with that. I'm like, okay. It's not like I'm some sort of horrible person who would interfere with someone's career or murder a baby. But okay, sure. And then Enzo has a ghoul. But Enzo's like, I can't bring my ghoul because I don't want anybody to know I have a ghoul. In character, I want that to be a secret. I'm like, okay. So the only ghoul that they have who's available is Martin Schreck. Good old Martin Schreck. The sad story of Martin Schreck is that much earlier in the game, Cowboy Bob burned down the Tremere Chantry. And so after that happened, Domnetta was like, okay, we need a new chantry. So Archibald, and this is when Archibald was her ghoul, so, he was her servant. He's like, Archibald, I need you to go buy a new chantry for me, the Seven Doors Hotel. But it turns out that this hotel that Domnetta has picked out is owned by this really old German guy, Martin Schreck. He's like 80 years old. He lives alone with his cat, and he owns this hotel. And when they go and offer to buy it from him, he's just like, no, I don't want to sell it. And they went through a long process of like all sorts of confusing plans about faking his death and getting one of them written into his will and then throwing him off of a boat or something. And like, we gotta pretend that he has an aunt in Germany who's rich, who's died, who willed him something to make him leave. And like a lot of these convoluted weird plans that didn't make any sense. But then finally they just went to the easiest thing, which was just ghoul him. And Archibald wasn't a vampire yet. He was still a ghoul himself, so he couldn't ghoul anybody. So Anna did it. Anna just like snuck into the guy's house, force-fed him her blood, and ghouled him. So then, once he's ghouled, she just walks up and she's like, hey, old man, sell me that hotel. And he's like, oh, yes, mistress, of course, I'll sell you the hotel. Anything you want. She's like, okay. And now you're going to come live with me and the Wyatt family on my fucking cult compound. Like, oh, no problem. This is the children of the corn land. We murdered all the children of the corn and it's ours now. Go clean up my shit. It's like, oh, as you wish, mistress. And now 10 years down the line, fucking Martin Schreck is still this withered old man with, inhuman strength and immortality from the vampire blood, is still following Anna around doing her bidding. So she takes him, they put him on the plane, like, get on the plane, Martin. He's just like, oh, yes, I'll get on the plane. He gets on the plane, and they go off to Chicago. While they're getting ready to go, some of them drive out to go kidnap Capone. And they take some of the Nosferatu with them. They hire some Nosferatu. Like, here, I'll give you $50 to come help me kidnap a guy. Because they want some guys who can turn invisible. They find Capone, and it's at a motel. And after a lot of back and forth of like arguing over how to figure out whether he was in the room or not, they finally were like, wait a minute, just send Jimmy Nosferatu in there, invisible, just look at the fucking register and tell us what room they're in. And he comes back and is like, he figures out what room they're in. For some reason, they were under the impression that everyone would be asleep in there. It was obvious to me that if you've got like 2 U.S. Marshals escorting a prisoner, one of them is going to be awake at all times on guard. They immediately wake up the 2 guards who start shooting at him, or at least one of them does. The other one's like trying to get his gun. But they're vampires, so being shot is like meaningless. It's like if someone shoots you with a BB gun, it doesn't really... I mean, it might hurt a little, but it's not stopping you from doing anything. And then they free Al Capone, and they're like, okay, you're coming with us. They then discover when Al Capone sees the Nosferatu and flips his shit that Al Capone is not a ghoul. Al Capone is not familiar with any vampire stuff. He doesn't know anything about this, and he freaks out. So they have to like knock him out. And then they got the fake Al Capone, and the fake Al Capone's like, okay, put me in handcuffs so they can take me to jail. And they're like, well, this didn't go the way we expected it at all. I'm not sure how they expected it to go. If they just burst in, I thought they were going to be sneaky about it or something. But they're like, this didn't go right. We can't just leave 2 unconscious U.S. Marshals and Al Capone still handcuffed. They'll wake up and they'll know something happened. And it's like, well, of course, obviously they'll know something happened, but their prisoner is still here. So what's the worst that they're going to think happened? Like there was an attempted prison break? And like, maybe we should let the fake Al Capone out, shoot him in the leg, or knock him unconscious, or maybe we should just kill him. And the fake Al Capone's like, whoa, no, just like they'll just think I was trying to break out and I didn't make it. I'll tell them I tried to get away. And they're like, shut up, Al Capone, with your good ideas. They just like knock him unconscious. And they just start trying to figure out what to do. And it was so weird because it was really simple. All they needed to do was just leave. They have what they came for. They got the real Al Capone. They put the fake one there. Just go. Just leave. Like, yeah, the agents will know something happened, but they still have Al Capone, so they're not going to think that he's not there. But they're like, no, it's not clean enough. It's too sloppy. We got to kill everyone. And I was like, I don't understand how that's better. So they shoot everybody. They kill the two unconscious U.S. Marshals, and they're like, now they won't suspect that anything happened. I'm like, well, it was like a Coen Brothers movie where like they come in there like, we got a very simple plan. Their plan makes no sense. They burst in, it goes wrong as it obviously would, and then they panic and they're just like, we got to kill everyone. And I'm like, you don't have to kill anyone. There's no one needs to die. It's like, bah, 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 bah. It's like Mr. Blonde, the whole fucking place up. But anyway, they leave with Al Capone, get on their plane, and they fly the fuck to Chicago. And I wanted to make a real impression. I figured they're probably only going to be in Chicago once, maybe twice in the whole campaign. Want it to be memorable. So they come in, and the first thing they see is a werewolf.
Werewolf?
No, werewolf. Where? Say it.
And they've got this werewolf chained up in silver chains, and this woman is torturing it. And they come in and are like, oh shit, that's a fucking werewolf, isn't it? And weirdly, the players were actually very confused by this too when I brought this up. Werewolves in World of Darkness are... It's weird. They are nothing like any werewolves you've ever seen in like any kind of werewolf movie. They're like the good guys. They're like the lawful good protectors of nature.
This is absolutely fascinating.
Right.
They go up and they start talking to Alana, and she's a toreador. Her art form, her like obsession, her artistic endeavor is torture. You know what they say, if you love your job, you never work a day in your life. And Alana loves her job.
You'll be a dentist. You have a talent for causing things.
And so they start chatting with her, and she takes them up to meet Loden. They meet Loden, and they meet Horatio Ballard. The story with Ballard is just that he's this very rich guy who I think he like hunted Loden down because he wanted to be immortal, and Loden was like, you sad little man, okay, something like that. And he's kind of like one of Loden's top lieutenants because the guy is just fucking loaded. He's got so much money and so many political connections. He's just, a very powerful guy, and a grotesquely fat and gluttonous vampire. I had given them a little side task because I wanted to make sure they had a reason to talk to Horatio Ballard because I just thought he was a fun character to roleplay. Before they left for Chicago, I had Dr. Carter come over to Nathan and be like, Nathan, my lad, I understand you're on your way to Chicago. Is that true? And Nathan's like, no. My aunt is going to Chicago. Is that what you're talking about? I guess I could go to Chicago. And Dr. Carter's like, good. I was wondering if you could do me a favor while you're in Chicago. I have a bet that I have to settle, a delivery that I have to make of a sum I owe, and it's been rather a long time, beginning to be a tad bit embarrassing now. So I'd like you to take $1 million to someone named Horatio Ballard. I owe him that on a wager we established. And Nathan's like, okay, yeah, I could do that. Like $1 million, what was the wager? And Dr. Carr's like, oh, it's nothing important. It was just a minor issue of geopolitics. I really did not anticipate that anyone was going to give that much of a fuck about Archduke Ferdinand. And Nathan is like, wait, are you, like, out of character? She's like, are you implying that Dr. Carter started the First World War? And I go, no, I'm implying that Horatio Ballard did on a bet. And Nathan is like, wait, wasn't I in that war? Like, I was traumatized by that war. That's why I'm so messed up. I think I should be mad about this. And I was like, well, be mad if you want. Do you want the money? Ballard, of course, very dismissive. I naturally, like, they have art for Ballard, but I didn't really like it. I was like, he's got to be Sidney Greenstreet. Like, that's who Ballard has to look like, right? Who else? Nathan comes up to talk to him, and Ballard's like, who are you, young man? I can tell by the cut of your suit and its substandard fabric are not anyone of means or importance. And Nathan's just like... But so they give Ballard the money, and they meet Loden. And Loden turns around, and the reveal, which is that Loden is Christopher Walken. He's like, hello, and welcome to my humble abode. My name is Loden, the Prince of Chicago. And they're very excited. I think it was Nathan who said, well, obviously we are in the wrong city because this prince is way cooler than our prince. So they chat with Loden a bit. He's very gracious with them. He's very friendly. And he invites them to stay. He's like, yeah, you can stay as long as you like. And we're having a salon tonight. There's a vampire here named Kevin who's going to be putting on a show. You should stay and watch. This should be very entertaining. And they're like, yeah, cool, we'll stay. That sounds great. And then they kind of are socializing around, chatting with people. They talk to Alana quite a bit. And I had actually prepared a lot of information about Alana's backstory, but they don't really ask her anything about that. They just start talking about her torturing people and why she likes torturing. And then somehow this kind of spirals out of control into them talking about like making snuff film. You could like film yourself torturing people and you could like put it on the screen. And Alana's like, that sounds fascinating. Do you think it would be considered gauche if I were to show a film of myself torturing someone instead of actually doing it? They're like, no, it would be really cool. Yeah, we're gonna buy you a movie camera and we're gonna mail it to you. What's your address? But anyway, they chat around. They talk with some of the players. Al Capone continues to freak out because there's Nosferatu around. There's a fucking werewolf. He doesn't know what's up. So Alana just like hypnotizes him, just conks him out like, does the old what do you call it? Crocodile Dundee. And then it's time for the salon. They all get into their little seats, Loden's on the front. Everybody kind of sits in. They all settle in like, let's see this show. Let's see this performance. And out comes Kevin. And he's like, hello, my name is Kevin, the magician.
I am Brutalitops, the magician.
Kevin is a Malkavian who thinks he's a Toreador. So he has no talent, but he thinks he is the world's greatest magician. He just starts talking and he's like, what I have here is a samurai sword that I have gotten from the ancient Chinese masters of Tibetan archaeology. This sword is folded over 74,000 times. It is a sword of healing magic, and it cannot harm mortal flesh. And so his magic trick, the first of his magic tricks, is that he's going to impale the sword into himself. And he goes up, and I'm like, and Kevin reaches up and he puts the sword, like the tip of the sword, against his chest. And I'm about to describe his trick, and immediately, I think it was Anna, goes, can I flip a plot card to say that he actually kills himself? And then Nathan is like, I also want to flip a plot card to say that he kills himself. Can I do that? With characters like Kevin, when you come up with NPCs like this, sometimes you're going to introduce these NPCs and the players are immediately going to want to kill them. Other times, they're going to immediately want to adopt them. You never know. So with Kevin, it was the former. And so they're talking about like, I want to flip cards to kill this guy. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you can do that if you want to flip a card to say that he accidentally kills himself in his magic trick. But then they're like, well, wait a minute. I really want to see where this trick is going. And they start having a debate over should we flip cards to have him kill himself because we hate him. This is like 10 seconds into meeting this guy. Or should we not, because we really want to see how ridiculous this has got to be a train wreck, right? We want to see this trick. What they decide is we're going to let him go. We're going to let him do his trick to see what it's like. And then during the last trick of the act, then we're going to decide whether we want to kill him or not with our plot cards. So that's what they do. Kevin's trick basically is that he is trying to do a magic trick where he like impales himself with a sword like an illusion. But because he's a vampire, he tries to do it like legit by just stabbing himself with the sword for real, but it actually hurts the entire time. So his trick is mostly him slowly driving the sword into his chest while screaming like, "Ah!" The vampires in the audience are just sort of like... So then Kevin is like, now for my next trick, I will need a volunteer. That person there who is not a plant, that person from the audience, come up. And he brings out this box. If you've ever seen like bad magic, which is all magic, I'm sure you've seen a trick like this. It's like a box. He puts somebody in it. He puts his assistant in it, closes it. And then it's like you stick the sword through. It's like, oh, look, the sword went right through her and she's fine. Da-da! It couldn't possibly be that something's happening in that box you can't see. Trust me, the sword really went through her. But because Kevin is such a terrible magician, he can't do this trick correctly. And I tell the players, like, this is it, by the way, just so you know, in a metagame sense, this is the last trick. There isn't anything else. He only has 2 tricks. So now they've decided they're not going to flip cards to kill him. They have lots of red cards. The way the plot cards work is they are blue on one side, red on the other. So when you flip a blue card to make something good happen, it's now a red card. And to get it to be blue again, you gotta flip up the bad. So if you want to have more goody things, you gotta make bad things happen to make the good things happen again. So a lot of them have lots of red cards right now. Several of them have only red cards, and they're like, we gotta do something with all these red cards. So one of them is like, can I flip a red card to blue to make something horrible go wrong in his trick? And I'm like, okay, like what? Like, he frenzies, or he sets himself on fire or something. I'm like, okay. Someone else is like, can I flip a card too? If we flip 2 red cards, does that make it worse? And I'm like, yes. If you flip 2 red cards, that makes it worse. That becomes exponentially worse. Let's go. Go heavy or go home. We're flipping both, like 2 of them flip their red cards. Like, we want to see this go completely off the rails. And I'm like, okay, motherfuckers, let's do this. Kevin does his trick, impales the woman, and stabs her for real because he's a terrible magician. She starts screaming and gushing blood through the box. The Toreadors start laughing at him, and the players are, and I say that like the Toreadors start laughing. The players are like, we laugh too. I point and laugh. I laugh at him, and I encourage others to laugh. And so Kevin starts having a fit, and he's screaming at them like, don't laugh at me! Do not laugh! This is my salon! Don't laugh at me! And he freaks out, and I roll frenzy for him, and he frenzies, because he's so fucking pissed at them for laughing at him. And he starts thrashing around. He's like throwing his table over, he flips over his table full of swords, knocks down the box with the screaming, bleeding woman in it, like swinging around, screaming, and I say to them, like, at the front of the like stadium seats, like the theater seats, you see like the prince sitting there, and he's just like, I don't get it. Kevin goes and he like crashes into the wall and starts like just tearing at the wall, and he tears up one of the light fixtures, which is like a gas lamp, and it sparks and sets the wall on fire, and so flame rushes down the wallpaper. And now everybody in the room has to make a frenzy check. Most of the players, I think, pass. I think the players almost all passed, but we're all passed. But a lot of other vampires don't. And one of them is Horatio Ballard, who is near the front. He just gets up and runs, and he's like, 600, 700 pounds of guy, and he's like charging, knocking people aside like bowling balls. The room is exploding in flame. Vampires are frenzying and running everywhere, and the players are like, let's get the fuck out of here. And they start running, and as they are all like running out of the room, looking for stairways, looking for exits, because the building is on fire, and as much as you are afraid of a building on fire, vampires way more afraid, because vampires, they go up like dry pine needles, man. But as they're fleeing, Cassandra then notices, she hears something, which is the second red card, which is the howling of wolves outside, because the werewolves have come.
I've made a huge mistake.
And so as the vampires are frenzying and fleeing down the stairs into the lobby of the museum, an entire pack of werewolves just comes like bursting through the walls and the windows and starts tearing people up. The thing about werewolves and vampires, there's a huge power curve disparity between the two of them. Werewolves are super badass in terms of their physical stats. The majority of vampires, if they come anywhere near a werewolf, it just like ends them. The really powerful vampires, the elder vampires, as their abilities ramp up, they eventually get some powers that are pretty boss, and which can really like wreak havoc on even werewolves. Now, generally, a single vampire is still not going to be able to fight a pack of werewolves because they're just going to rush you and destroy you. But there is one power that vampires have that is extremely effective against werewolves. It's extremely effective against pretty much everything. It's probably the most powerful ability that any vampire can have, and I would say arguably one of the most powerful abilities in World of Darkness, and that is the ability Majesty. In the other video, I talked about awe, like this supernatural charisma where you're just like, oh, and people just like, oh wow, you're so cool. Look how neat this guy. Like they're just attracted to you, drawn to you. Majesty is like the same concept, but ramped up way higher in power. You know, it's cranked to 11. There are two really potent effects that Majesty has. The first is that people are left basically, they can't really speak against you.
We could arrange to have you carried.
If you're like, I think the sky is purple, even in their mind, they're like, no, there's like, they can't say it. They can't dispute you unless they break out of the effect, and which they can do. You can willpower your way out of it. But that's where the other really dangerous thing about Majesty comes from, which is that when Majesty is up, the people who are affected by it, not only are they not able to resist you or to speak against you, they feel compelled to come to your defense against anyone who does. So if you're in a room of 20 people and you pop Majesty and one guy resists and he's like, fuck you, the other 19 people are all like, fuck you! Like they immediately just like, I hate that guy. How dare you speak against him? And that also includes if they come at you, like if they come at you with words, people under Majesty come at them with words. But if they come at you with the knife, the people under Majesty come at them with a knife, which means that you can create situations with Majesty where a mob rushes you, you pop Majesty, like 2 or 3 guys break free and rush you, but their own friends then turn on them and kill them because they are now compelled to defend you. It's a really powerful ability, incredibly powerful, and there are times when it can fuck up and not be of any use if everyone resists, but if you pop that at the right time and it works, you can really turn the tides of power even against a mob of werewolves. So these werewolves come in hard and they are just tearing people the fuck apart. I'm just describing them like shredding vampires with one move. Like I say to that, like one of the werewolves comes through and he's got like the body of one of the door guards that you guys saw, like just kind of the remnants of it, like a rib cage and some tattered clothes like around his arm, like bracelets, as if, and I used the term, as if he ass puppeted the guy into oblivion. And poor little Martin Shrek, he's trying to run away and a werewolf just comes up and just like grabs him and just boom, takes him into like 20 pieces. And he's gone. And Anna's like, damn it, that was my only goal. Now, normally you would say, that seems really extreme, Mike. Like, fucking a pack of werewolves? Jesus Christ. Like, setting the building on fire, okay. That's funny, I guess. That's not like the most severe danger to them. But like, werewolves, are you kidding, man? They can't fight werewolves. I know. But I knew that they would be able to get through this because Loden has Majesty. And once Loden gets downstairs and the werewolves are closing in on him, that's indeed what he does. He pops Majesty. And the werewolves just like fall under his sway. All of them except for, I think, 2, the alpha and one other who resist. But the players don't really see what happens next because the players are just booking it. 2 of them have frenzied from fear and just like burst out the windows running for the woods. The other 3 like get out and run to the car and just drive away. And so they leave Elysium on fire and full of werewolves, and they see Loden throw up Majesty. Yeah, you feel this weird effect come over you, but you like push it aside. But then you see the werewolves kind of go like slack-jawed and like they kind of limp, and they just like fix their eyes on Loden as they sort of like drift towards him. And they're like, oh fuck, I don't know what that is. Just get away. Get away. And they just go running. Some of them say, we should probably go back and help. And the others are like, we're not going back. Like, we can never go back to Arizona. We're not going back to that shit show. This is their fault for torturing that werewolf. They shouldn't have done that. Fuck them. They get what they deserve. Let's just get out of Chicago. And they get to New York and they do their business in New York, which is a whole other story. And eventually they leave New York as well, and they come back to LA. And when they get to LA, they go back to their own Elysium. They go back to the Egyptian theater, and they go to the prince, and they're like, well, Cassandra's like, okay, like, Your Majesty. And she tells her the whole thing of what happened, and we got Al Capone, went to Chicago, blah, blah, blah. And the prince is just like, here, and she like hands her another letter. And the letter says, Dear Divya, I offer greetings and best wishes from Chicago. With this letter, I extend my thanks for the successful fulfillment of the favor which I had requested of you. My servitor, Mr. Capone, is now safely in hand, and I have you and your underlings to thank. As you may or may not have heard, a minor inconvenience with the local Garou caused the destruction of our Elysium while your messengers were in the midst of their visit. I attached the remains of the ringleader of the assault. Those who assaulted the sanctity of Elysium have been properly dealt with, and that I remain firmly in control from heart to tendril of my domain. Best wishes, Loden. And he's got a werewolf head that's been mailed with it. He's got to make sure she knows, like, you may hear that some werewolves showed up and burned down my house. Just so you know, I fucking dealt with that shit. Don't let anybody think that Loden didn't deal with that shit. You tell them. I kicked their asses. And so, that was the Chicago trip. Both a huge clusterfuck, but also, you know, a success. They did get the job done. And nobody died. Well, none of them died. Poor little Martin, he died. And a lot of other unnamed people died horribly in that battle. But you know, plus the marshals and Al Capone, and of course the baby who they murdered. But other than all of those people, no one died. All the bad guys got out okay, and that's what really matters. And just a good example of that style of storytelling, of just give the players a problem, let them create the situation. I think some people may worry that their players, that if they tell their players something like, just do this thing, but they don't have a plan, that the players won't be able to figure it out, or that they'll figure it out and it'll be too easy. But, you know, usually, like, sometimes that'll happen, but usually, you know, your players, they're both a lot smarter than you give them credit for, and a lot stupider than you give them credit for. And believe me, they don't need your help to figure out how to solve a problem, and they don't need your help to make that problem much, much more complicated and difficult than it needs to be. They will do both of those things just fine on their own. They'll come up with a solution, and they'll come up with the complications, and all you have to do is just respond. So yeah, if you ever go to Chicago, watch out for werewolves, and be very, very careful not to flip 2 red cards at the same time. Thanks for watching.